Hi everyone, this is Dr. Karen's, and this is my last lecture on the digestive system, where the focus is going to be the small intestine and the large intestine. So, if you listened to my lecture on the accessory organs, you know that the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas are all either producing or delivering different enzymes and bile to the small intestine. Um, Again, those accessory organs are not part of the GI tract. Food is not passing through those organs, but they are delivering things to that small intestine so we can finish digesting and absorbing all of the nutrients in that chyme that has just come from a stomach. So the small intestine is actually pretty long. It's longer than the large intestine, but it's skinny. Long, convoluted, and skinny. There's three areas, the duodenum, and that's the one we're going to talk about the most because there's a lot going on in that duodenum. It is the shortest section. There's a lot going on there. Then there's the jejunum followed by the ileum, and the ileum is what's going to then feed into the large intestine or the colon. When you're learning the anatomy here, you should understand and know that there are three sections and what order they go in. But most images, with the exception of this one, most images and most models of the small intestine, you're not going to be able to tell necessarily like where the jejunum begins and ends or where the ileum begins. But you will know where the duodenum is because you know that that is directly connected to the stomach, and the ileum is directly connected to the large intestine. Oops. Okay. So we've seen this picture before. We can see how all these different accessory organs, the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas, their relationship to the duodenum and how that bile duct is delivering, and the pancreatic duct are delivering bile and pancreatic enzymes here to the duodenum of the small intestine once chyme enters that area. All right. What is this small intestine doing? So certainly finishing some chemical digestion. That's why we need those pancreatic enzymes. But also, this is where most, if not all, absorption of nutrients is occurring, is in the small intestine. Now, that's a lot to ask, and it's in a very fixed amount of space, that small intestine. And so similar to that mucosal layer of the stomach that where we saw lots of wrinkles or rugae, there's going to be some anatomical modifications to the small intestine to increase that surface area of the mucosal lining to allow maximum nutrient absorption in a small amount of space. I mean, look at these numbers. It says these modifications that we're going to talk about will increase that surface area of the small intestine so much that it would equal the size of a tennis court, and that all fits in your abdomen. So what are these what are these modifications? Circular folds, villi, and microvilli. And we're going to start macroscopically. Circular folds are more macroscopic, microvilli are microscopic. So let's look. Looking at this picture on top, we're starting big. If you were to cut open the small intestine and just look at it with the naked eye, you would see folds in that mucosal lining, big folds, kind of like the rugae in a stomach. Those are the circular folds. But let's zoom in on one circular fold. And what you can see is, this is what you can see in figure B as well, is a villi or a villus. So a villus is an extension of that mucosal lining, and there are cells, lining that villus, and you can even see next to that villus there's a crypt. Like we saw in the stomach, there are crypts there as well. So we have these big the whole layer is folded. Those are the circular folds. Zoom in on a circular fold and you're going to find these little extensions that are called villi. And then zoom in on one of those cells of a villus. Zoom in again, and we're just looking at one cell. And the apical surface of that cell has folds in it as well. This is not cilia, they're not hairs. They are extensions of the cell membrane. And we call them microvilli. And because they are microscopic, you have to get at the cell level to see it. Often called the brush border because it does give the apical surface of those cells a brush-like appearance. It looks like cilia, but it is not. They are little tiny extensions or folds in the cell membrane. There are lots of enzymes that come from these brush border cells. That we're going to use as well as those pancreatic enzymes to finish chemical digestion. So the brush border enzymes specifically from the small intestine are going to be for carbohydrate and protein digestion. In these intestinal crypts, there are other types of cells. Most of them are enterocytes, and that's where most of the absorption is going to happen. There's those cells can also produce some intestinal juice that can help carry the chyme along that small intestine. There are goblet cells for creating mucus. Again, that's for, I think, lubrication. We're trying to move things along. The enteroendocrine cells that we've been talking about, these are the cells of the small intestine, particularly the duodenum, that are making these hormones, cholecystokinin and secretin, that can talk to the pancreas and can talk to the stomach as well. Paneth cells are for antimicrobial purposes to help destroy any bacteria that might still be in that chyme that survived the stomach. And then, of course, there's got to be some stem cells here to keep replenishing the population. There are some other lymphoid tissues that you find in the small intestine, Peyer's patches, and there again, where you're going to find those where there might be some collections of bacteria. So that's, again, helping to fight the infection that could possibly happen. Okay. So intestinal juice. So we have stomach, gastric juice, there's pancreatic juice, there's intestinal juice as well. Again, what are we trying to do? We need to neutralize the chyme because it's acidic. It just came from the stomach. We also need some of those enzymes to help finish chemical digestion. And we want to be able to continue to move this chyme to the large intestine. So we may need to add some more water as well to get this, to continue it moving. All right. Let's see. So once that chyme reaches the small intestine, we're going to finish digestion, carbohydrates and proteins mostly, and fats, because the fats have not been digested at all yet. Well, I shouldn't say that. A lot of them are going to get digested. Some of them will get digested in the stomach, but a lot of them will still get digested here in the small intestine. We know we're getting some of those lipases from the pancreas. This chyme is going to be in that small intestine for about 3 to 6 hours to allow maximum absorption of nutrients and water. Where are enzymes coming from for digestion? We know they're coming from the accessory structures, the pancreas, the bile is coming from the gallbladder, and the liver, I guess. And then we have those brush border enzymes from the duodenum itself. All right. So I was saying earlier that cholecystokinin and secretin they're going to talk to the pancreas when chyme first enters the duodenum and say, hey, we have food here, we need your enzymes, and we need the bile so we can finish chemical digestion and start absorption. Those same enzymes will also talk to the stomach and tell it to say, yes, we recognize that you are sending us some chyme. You can continue to send that to us, or the message will be, stop sending it to us and turn off the gastrin from the stomach, because we don't want to overwhelm the small intestine. If we do, it's not going to be able to absorb all the nutrients that we need it to absorb. We are going to see propulsion in the small intestine, right? We want to send the chyme through the small intestine to get to the large intestine, whatever is left at the end. We need to send on to the large intestine after everything has been absorbed and digested, that can be absorbed and digested. But to allow for this absorption to occur optimally, we also want, as we're sending things through, it's going to be sent through very slowly, but we also want to see segmentation, which is this movement back and forth, not necessarily maybe to mix things a little bit, because that chyme is receiving the pancreatic juices and the bile. So we do want to mix that together. But also it's, if there's any more mechanical breakdown that needs to occur, that can happen with this segmentation. We can mix the pancreatic juices and the bile and the intestinal juices, mix that with the chyme so we can finish chemical digestion. But also it's just allowing that chyme to be in that small intestine long enough for absorption. Okay. When we finished with the chemical digestion that we need to finish, and when the small intestine has finished absorbing everything it's going to be able to absorb, we do need to send whatever's left, we need to send it to the large intestine. And it's going to enter through another sphincter, just like there was a sphincter that led from the esophagus to the stomach. There's also a sphincter, I didn't mention this earlier, but there is a sphincter that leaves the stomach, or is where the stomach meets the duodenum of the small intestine. And then there's going to be a sphincter here where the small intestine meets the first part of the large intestine, and that's called the ileocecal sphincter, because that first part of the large intestine is called the sphinctum. The cecum. The cecum. So that is how we can control movement of chyme through that GI tract, or that bolus even coming from the esophagus, is through these sphincters, which are basically like valves. So there are different reflexes that are going to move things through as well, just like we saw with some of the other organs. This is this table is an overview. I don't know why they put this here, because we haven't talked about the large intestine yet, but this is a great table when you are trying to learn the functions of all of the different GI organs. Come to this table, because it gives you the major functions, and they even have color-coded and named all of the 6 different functions of the digestive system. Go back to that overview lecture where I was saying I want you to pay attention to what processes are happening in which organs. Well, it tells you in this table right here. This is great. So come here and look and use this table. All right, we've finished chemical digestion. We've absorbed all of the nutrients that we can from the food that we've just eaten, and they've entered the blood. They're headed toward the liver via the hepatic portal circulation. So anything that we don't want in that blood that we've just absorbed from our food can be dealt with before we send that blood into the regular circulation. So now, is everything gone? No, there's stuff left that we could not digest or we could not absorb. and it's the large intestine's job to get rid of that stuff. So here's our large intestine. It's not as long as the small intestine, but it's fat. There's some unique features that we haven't seen before. Tania or Teniae coli. These are bands of smooth muscle. It looks like a strip almost that runs the length of the small intestine. So there's smooth muscle here, so that's going to help with contractions or to allow things to move through here. Ostra. So look at the shape of this tube. It's almost like it's got bubbles almost. And there's these little pouches or sacs. Those are hostra. And then some appendages that are filled with fat. So here are the different parts of this large intestine. The cecum, the first part of the large intestine, that is where the small intestine is going to empty into. Here's this ileocecal valve. Then there's this little, almost like an appendage, really, that sticks out off of the cecum. This is the appendix. There's lymphoid tissue in here. It can help deal with infection. If there's any bacteria still left in that food, it's going to accumulate there. Also, this appendix is storing good bacteria, the bacteria we want in our gut, which we're going to find out about later, a little bit later. But it's living here. If your appendix ruptures, however, all that good bacteria is now all over the abdominal pelvic cavity, and that is not a good thing. We want gut bacteria, but it needs to stay in the large intestine. We don't want it everywhere. So sometimes that appendix, if it gets inflamed, it's in danger of bursting and it needs to be removed. Okay, the colon is really kind of like the main part of the large intestine. Often we use the term large intestine and colon interchangeably, but really it starts after that cecum. We start with the ascending colon, the transverse colon, and then the descending colon. And then that descending colon starts to curve and becomes the sigmoid colon. And then we enter then into the rectum, where this is really like the storage area for all of our undigestible wastes. And when enough has accumulated, then it will exit out the anal canal. And there are sphincters in there to help control that elimination process. Talked about appendicitis. All right, let's talk about that good bacteria, this bacterial flora. Why do we need bacteria living in our colon or in our small intestine? They're doing a lot of things for us. So I mentioned that, there's still, after chemical digestion is done, after absorption is done, there's still undigestible things left that are entering that large intestine. If any of that is carbohydrates, the bacteria that are in that colon are going to digest it themselves via fermentation. They're going to use it for their source of energy. And that's how they're staying alive in our colon. We're feeding them basically any undigestible carbohydrates. The problem with that is that a byproduct of fermentation, which we will learn when we learn about metabolism, a byproduct of fermentation is carbon dioxide and other gases. And so if you ever feel like bloated after a meal, it's because of all those bacteria that are digesting all the carbohydrates that you could not digest. Either they're indigestible to you, or you had such a carbohydrate heavy meal that there was more carbohydrate than what you could physically digest and absorb. And so there's just some stuff left over, and the bacteria will take care of it. But another reason that we need these bacteria is they are making B complex and some B complex vitamins and some vitamin K vitamins that we need. Vitamin K particularly, we need in order to produce clotting factors, and we cannot make this on our own. So we need the bacteria to do that for us. So we really could not survive without our gut bacteria. Okay. Um, some disorders or homeostatic imbalances. Some of you may have heard of C. diff. That is a digestive, really serious, actually, digestive system infection. It is caused by C. diff stands for Clostridium difficile. This is a bacteria. We do often find this in our normal gut microbiome or our gut bacteria, but we have so many different species of bacteria living in our gut that they all keep each other in check normally. And so they don't normally cause a problem in us. But if you have to take antibiotics, and this is not true for every antibiotic, but it is true for some antibiotics, particularly strong ones. If you need to take antibiotics for another unrelated infection, those antibiotics are not treating just the bacteria you're trying to get rid of. They are going to wipe out or could potentially wipe out your gut bacteria. And if that happens, for whatever reason, that C. diff bacteria is hardier and can survive the antibiotic, but now there's no other bacteria around to keep it in check. And so now it can cause a problem. It can overgrow. It can cause pseudomembranous colitis, which is inflammation of the colon. That can lead to bowel perforation, and that would lead to sepsis and probably death. And it's a really, it's not a fun infection to have. I've known some people that have had it. One person actually lost a lot of weight on it. It was really hard for her to treat it. It can be hard to treat because a lot of antibiotics don't work against this particular bacteria. Some people are prone to this. Once you get it once, you can get it again. Some people get it more than once. And if that happens, you can actually treat this. This sounds really gross, but you can treat this with a fecal transplant. So what are you taking? You're taking a pill that contains healthy gut bacteria from somebody else. And you ingest that, and the idea is those bacteria are going to colonize in your colon and kind of replace and all of your bacteria that maybe weren't working properly and keep that C. diff in check so you no longer have these infections. All right, how long does things stay in the large intestine? 12 to 24 hours. There's no more digestion happening here except what any bacteria might be digesting. But your digestive system is not, your digestive cells, they're not doing any digestion. Any vitamins made by those bacteria will be absorbed. Water and some electrolytes will be resorbed or absorbed here as well. So there is some absorption happening, but no more true digestion. And really the major function here of the large intestine would be propulsion and then defecation or elimination if we're thinking about those digestive processes. You actually don't need your large intestine to live. You might know some people that have had a colostomy and they have a colostomy bag, or it's often called an ileostomy. It's just a little bag to collect, really to collect your feces because you don't have your colon anymore. Okay. So since we're doing propulsion, this large intestine has to be modal, right? It's got to be contracting and pushing all that stuff through to the rectum. So those haustra, those pouches are going to contract and start moving things. There's also a reflex here, the gastrocolic reflex. Gastro meaning stomach, colic meaning colon. This is a reflex that will be initiated when food reaches your stomach. So if you eat your next meal and food reaches your stomach, that is going to talk to your colon and say, hey, if there's anything still in you from your previous meal, you need to get rid of it now because another meal is coming. And that's what we mean by mass movement. So now we're going to have more powerful contractions that are going to move things into the rectum. All right. So what is that? There's a reflex here. Okay. So when when you've collected enough waste in this like sigmoid colon and rectum area, now there's going to be a reflex because we need to empty everything, because you can't, you know, if you don't empty it, it's just going to keep backing up into further and further into the large intestine, and that's going to make everything stop. So this is what we call this defecation reflex. You have parasympathetic signals. This is the rest and digest part of our bodies. So this is part of that. So this is parasympathetic division. That's going to contract that sigmoid colon and the rectum, and it's going to relax these the internal anal sphincter so things can pass. We have voluntary control over the external anal sphincter, and so we can control that. We do not have control over the internal anal sphincter, which is this right here, more internal, but the external ones we do. So if it's convenient, if it's a convenient time for you to go, you will use those voluntary muscles to kind of like to relax that external anal sphincter and allow that waste to pass. Or if it's not convenient to go, you can hold it in until it is. Some common imbalances here of this process: diarrhea versus constipation. So diarrhea would be, you know, if things are moving too fast through the large intestine, there's not enough time to absorb all the water, and so you end up passing it. This can be caused by irritation of the colon, maybe some bacteria, even the jostling of your digestive organs. Like this happens a lot in long distance runners, just because they're jumping up and down, and all those digestive organs are getting jostled around, and that can affect how much water can get absorbed. But it can lead to dehydration and an electrolyte imbalance. So if you have like food poisoning that's causing this, or some kind of gastrointestinal infection, you need to replace the water, you need to replace the electrolytes, or you can get dehydrated. The opposite: if things move too slowly through the large intestine, too much water gets absorbed, and now you have waste that becomes really compacted and really difficult to pass. If you don't have enough fiber or fluid in your diet, that can lead to this. Maybe not enough exercise, or even using laxatives too much can lead to this. And so obviously, you want a happy medium between these two. So what does that mean? Make sure you're getting a lot of fiber. Make sure you're drinking enough water. The last thing I want to talk about is I'm not gonna ask you how these nutrients get passed through into the blood, like how are they actually being transported. But I do just want to talk about the nutrients in general. So these last few slides are great because they are summarizing by nutrient in terms of where each nutrient is getting digested and absorbed. So look at carbohydrates. They're listing all of the different enzymes that can digest carbohydrates, and then where in the GI tract that is happening. And that's what you want to know. That's what I want you to know. And you can do the same thing for proteins. Here are all the enzymes that will digest proteins, and here are all the different GI tract organs where you will find those enzymes. And so therefore that's where proteins can be chemically digested. And the same thing for lipids and for nucleic acids. So again, I'm not going to ask you what transport mechanisms are being used to move these nutrients from the GI tract into the blood, but use these images here to summarize, okay, I need to know what are all the protein digestion enzymes. Okay, here they are. And here's where you find them all. So I know that proteins can be chemically digested in the stomach, in the small intestine, because of all these different enzymes. And you can do the same for the other 3 nutrients. And that's pretty much it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So again, just as a summary, what are we trying to do here with this digestive system? What do I want you to get out of this? What were those 6 main processes of digestion? In which organs are they occurring? And in terms of enzymes, what enzymes can digest which nutrients, and where in the GI tract are those enzymes found? So again, let me know if you have any questions.